A 5-year-old girl walked into a billionaire's office on a Tuesday night and asked him a question that no board meeting, no billion-dollar merger, no sleepless night had ever forced him to face. She didn't know she was changing his life. She didn't know she was changing her mother's. She just wanted someone to make the crying stop. What she got was something none of them expected. And what happens next will stay with you long after this story ends. If this kind of story speaks to your soul, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And leave a comment telling me, have you ever had a child say something that completely broke you open? The penthouse at the top of the glass tower in Tribeca had everything a man could want and nothing a man could need. 1,200 square feet of Italian marble, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a painting no gallery could afford, a kitchen with appliances that had never been used, and a silence so thick it had weight. Jae-soo stood at the window at 6:45 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up beneath him, and felt absolutely nothing. He had been feeling nothing for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. He knew the count not because he tracked it consciously, but because his body kept the calendar his mind refused to acknowledge. Every morning at 6:45, something in his chest tightened for approximately 4 seconds. He had learned to breathe through it. He had learned to set the coffee down during those 4 seconds so his hands wouldn't shake visibly. He had learned to resume his morning as though the tightening had never happened. Jae-soo was 34 years old, the youngest CEO in the history of U Capital Group, a real estate development firm that owned enough Manhattan square footage to constitute its own zip code. He was fluent in 4 languages, possessed a memory that his Harvard professors had called photographic, and had closed more deals in the past fiscal year than his father had managed in the previous decade. The Wall Street Journal had called him relentless. Forbes had called him visionary. His mother, when she called from Seoul every Sunday at precisely 9 in the morning Eastern Time, called him alone. She was not wrong. 3 years ago, Minji Park had been alive. 3 years ago, Jae-soo had been someone who laughed at dinner, who argued about which neighborhood had the best jjigae, who fell asleep on the couch watching terrible crime documentaries with his head in a woman's lap. 3 years ago, he had been 28 days from becoming a husband. And then, on a rain-slicked highway outside of Seoul, a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, and the woman Jae-soo loved became a name on a headstone instead of a name on a marriage certificate. The last thing he had said to Minji was not, "I love you." The last thing he had said, on a phone call she'd made from the car, was, "Can we talk about this later? I'm in the middle of something." She had been calling to tell him she'd found the perfect table centerpieces for the reception. He had been in the middle of a conference call about a property acquisition in Gangnam. The centerpieces cost $42. The property was worth $400 million. He would have burned every building he owned to get those $42 centerpieces back. He never spoke about this, not to his mother, not to his business partner, not to the therapist he had seen exactly twice before deciding that silence was a more efficient coping mechanism. He simply worked. He worked until the numbers replaced the memories, until the spreadsheets crowded out the guilt, until the silence in his penthouse felt like a choice rather than a punishment. It was not a choice. It was a sentence. 14 blocks north and an entire universe away, Simone Archer's alarm went off at 5:55 a.m. Not because she needed the extra 5 minutes, but because 5:55 gave her exactly enough time to lie in the dark and remember what it felt like to be a person before she had to become a machine. At 5:56, the machine activated. Shower. 4 minutes, no more. Coffee. Started before the shower. Ready after. Maya's lunch, assembled the night before, stored in the fridge, needed only the ice pack. Maya's outfit, laid out on the chair, socks tucked into shoes. Maya's hair, that was the variable. Some mornings were 15-minute mornings. Some mornings were 45-minute mornings. Simone had learned to build the entire day's schedule around her daughter's hair. By 6:30, Simone was dressed, fed, and standing in the doorway of the small bedroom that smelled like lavender detergent and crayons, watching her daughter sleep. Maya Archer was 5 years old, 27 pounds of quiet intensity, and the only reason Simone's alarm was set at all. Without Maya, Simone suspected she would have stopped setting alarms a long time ago. Not in a dangerous way, just in an I don't see the point way. Maya was the point. Simone was 29, an architect at a mid-sized firm in Midtown Manhattan, talented enough to be noticed and overworked enough to be underpaid. She had graduated second in her class at Howard, interned at two of the most competitive firms in the country, and spent the past 4 years proving that a single mother from Durham, North Carolina, could hold her own in a profession that still treated women like decorative elements in their own blueprints. She was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that lives in the bones, the kind that has its own zip code somewhere between the spine and the sternum. She was tired of being strong, tired of being both parents, tired of answering Maya's questions about why other kids had daddies who picked them up from school when Maya's daddy was a ghost, who had walked out when she was 11 months old without even leaving a note. Derek Cole. She hadn't said his name out loud in over a year. He had been 23 when Maya was born, a graphic designer with good taste in music and an absolute inability to be inconvenienced. Parenthood was an inconvenience. Midnight feedings were an inconvenience. A crying baby who needed him to grow up overnight was an inconvenience. So one Thursday, when Maya was 11 months old, Derek said he was going to get diapers from the bodega on the corner, and he simply never came back. No fight, no note, no dramatic exit. Just a man-shaped absence that Simone had spent 4 years learning to fill by herself. She didn't hate him. Hate required energy she couldn't afford. She was too busy packing lunches and paying rent, and explaining to a 5-year-old why the chair at the dinner table had only ever held a stuffed rabbit named Biscuit instead of a father. The call from her firm came at 3 in the afternoon, while Simone was deep in a set of structural drawings for a residential project in the West Village. The U Capital Project. The renovation on Lexington. They want your team to present concepts tonight, 7:30. Their office is in Tribeca, tonight. Simone pulled up her calendar, her contacts, her list of every person in New York City she could call for last-minute childcare. Her regular babysitter, Keisha, had texted at noon, flew, sorry, can't make it. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was visiting her sister in Baltimore. Her parents were a 12-hour drive away in North Carolina. She had no one. At 6:45, Simone walked into the lobby of U Capital Group's headquarters with a portfolio under one arm and a 5-year-old under the other. Maya had Biscuit, the stuffed rabbit who was missing one ear and most of his original stuffing, clutched to her chest, a backpack full of crayons and paper on her back, and an expression of grave curiosity on her face. "You have to be so quiet, baby. Like a mouse. Mommy has a very important meeting." Maya considered this. "Can I be a quiet bunny instead? Mice are scary." Simone bit the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. "You can be the quietest bunny in all of New York." She set Maya up in a glass-walled conference room adjacent to the main meeting space, crayons arranged by color the way Maya insisted, paper stacked, Biscuit positioned in the chair beside her like a boardroom colleague. The room had a clear sightline to the hallway. Maya could see out. Simone could see in. It would be fine. It would be 45 minutes. It would be fine. The meeting ran long. Concepts became debates. Debates became revisions. 45 minutes became 90. Simone glanced at the conference room every chance she got, catching glimpses of Maya's head bent over paper, crayon in hand. Fine. Everything was fine. Except at some point, later, Simone would never be able to pinpoint exactly when, Maya had gotten bored. And when Maya got bored, Maya explored. Jesu was alone in his office on the 42nd floor, reviewing the financials for a waterfront development in Long Island City, when he heard the softest knock he had ever heard. So soft he almost dismissed it as the building settling. But then it came again. 3 tiny taps, low on the door, at approximately the height of someone who was 3 feet tall. He looked up. His office door was ajar. He often left it open when the floor was supposed to be empty, which it was, because the meeting with the architectural team was happening 4 floors below, and his staff had gone home hours ago. Standing in the doorway was a small girl in a purple sweater, holding a stuffed rabbit that looked like it had survived several wars. She studied him with the frank, unflinching gaze that only children and very old people seem capable of, a gaze that does not perform social niceties, that does not pretend not to see what it sees. For a moment, neither of them moved. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire and a 5-year-old girl in a purple sweater, staring at each other across 1,200 square feet of executive office space. Then she spoke, "Are you married?" Jae-soo blinked. Of all the questions he had fielded in his career, from hostile board members, from skeptical investors, from journalists looking for cracks, this one delivered in the clear, unbothered voice of a kindergartner, hit differently. It hit somewhere he had bricked over. "No, I'm not." She tilted her head, the way birds do when they're processing information that doesn't quite fit their understanding of the world. "Do you want to be?" He opened his mouth, closed it. The honest answer was a canyon he did not have the courage to look into, so he deflected the way adults do when children ask questions that are too real. "That's a big question. Why do you ask?" Maya walked into his office as though she had been invited, which, in her mind, she had, because the door was open and open doors were invitations. She climbed into the leather chair across from his desk, set Biscuit on the armrest, and folded her hands in her lap with the gravity of a diplomat about to deliver terms. "My mommy cries sometimes, when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I'm not sleeping. I hear her." She paused, adjusting Biscuit's remaining ear. "I think she needs someone. She doesn't say it because she's brave, but I think she's tired of being brave all the time." Jae-soo did not move, did not breathe. "You look like you could be nice," Maya concluded, as though she had completed a thorough evaluation and found him adequate. "And you have a big office, so you probably have a big house, so there would be room for me and Biscuit. We don't take up a lot of space." Something cracked. Not loudly, not the way things break in movies, with sound and drama and a visible fracture line. This was quieter. This was a hairline crack in a wall that had been load-bearing for 3 years. A crack so small that no one would have noticed it from the outside. But Jae-soo felt it. He felt the entire structure of his controlled, calibrated, carefully empty life shift by a fraction of a degree. Because this child, this tiny, grave, rabbit-holding diplomat, had just described loneliness with more precision and compassion than any adult he had ever met. "She's tired of being brave all the time." He knew what that meant. He had been brave for 3 years. He was exhausted. Before he could respond, the door flew open and Simone was there, flushed, panicked, already apologizing. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." She was supposed to stay in the conference room. "Maya, baby, you cannot just wander into people's offices." But his door was open. "Mommy, that doesn't mean—" "It's all right." Jae-soo's voice came out quieter than he intended. He cleared his throat. "She wasn't bothering me. We were just talking." Simone looked at him. Really looked. The way you look at someone when you're trying to determine if they're being polite or honest. Whatever she saw made her shoulders drop half an inch. She reached for Maya's hand. "Say thank you to the nice man. Maya, we're going home." Maya slid off the chair, collected Biscuit, and turned back to Jae-soo. "Think about it." The words carried the earnest authority of someone who had just made a very reasonable business proposal and expected a timely response. Then she took her mother's hand and disappeared down the hallway, and Jae-soo sat alone in his office on the 42nd floor and stared at the chair where she had been sitting, and felt, for the first time in 3 years, the dangerous, terrifying, uncontrollable sensation of wanting something he couldn't acquire through negotiation. The project made avoidance impossible. Simone's team was assigned to the Lexington Avenue renovation, a historic building that U Capital had acquired for conversion into mixed-use residential and retail. It was a significant project, the kind that could define a young architect's career, and Simone threw herself into it with the ferocity of someone who understood that opportunities like this didn't come twice. The weekly progress meetings were held at the U Capital offices. Jae-soo did not normally attend progress meetings for individual projects. He had project managers for that, division heads, an entire hierarchy designed to keep him focused on the macro. But on the Tuesday following Maya's visit to his office, he appeared at the meeting, and the Tuesday after that, and the Tuesday after that. He told himself it was because the Lexington project was high profile. He told himself it was because the design concepts were innovative and deserved executive attention. He told himself many things, and none of them were the truth, and he knew none of them were the truth, and he attended the meetings anyway. Simone noticed. She would have had to be blind not to notice that the CEO of a billion-dollar company was sitting in on weekly progress meetings about window specifications and HVAC placement. She noticed, and she kept her distance, because distance was the geography she understood best. She had mapped its borders, built her walls to code, and she was not about to let anyone, especially not someone whose office her daughter had accidentally invaded, redraw the boundaries. The problem was Maya. The babysitter situation in New York City for a single mother with an architect's salary and an architect's hours was, to put it charitably, unreliable. Keisha recovered from the flu but then took a weekend job. The backup sitter moved to Jersey City. The after-school program ended at 5:30, and Simone's meetings rarely did. So Maya became an intermittent presence at U Capitol, doing homework in conference rooms, drawing in the lobby, charming the security guards into giving her peppermints from the bowl at the front desk, and somehow, inevitably, finding her way to the 42nd floor. The first time it happened again, Jesu found her sitting cross-legged outside his office door, drawing. He stopped, looked down. She looked up. "I didn't come in this time. I'm waiting to be invited." He felt something pull at the corner of his mouth, an unfamiliar muscular movement. It took him a moment to recognize it as a smile. "You're invited." It became a pattern. On the evenings when Maya was there, she would appear on the 42nd floor with her crayons and her rabbit and her quiet and devastating observations about the world. Jesu learned to keep a small stack of blank paper in his bottom drawer, then colored pencils, the professional kind, 72 colors, because Maya had mentioned once that her set at home didn't have turquoise, and no one should have to draw the ocean without turquoise. He taught her to make origami cranes, a skill his grandmother had taught him in Busan when he was Maya's age, in a house that smelled like doenjang and sea salt. He hadn't folded a crane in 20 years. His fingers remembered before his mind did. Maya taught him that the best color for a dinosaur was pink, that clouds were actually the dreams of sleeping birds. That Biscuit's missing ear had been lost in a heroic battle with a vacuum cleaner, and he had received a Medal of Honor for his bravery, which was why he got to sit in a chair at meetings. These were, objectively, the most important pieces of information Jesu had received in years. The shift with Simone happened gradually, the way dawn happens, not all at once, but in degrees of increasing light that you don't notice until suddenly you can see. It started with the blueprints. Late evenings reviewing plans for the Lexington building, the rest of her team gone, the office quiet enough to hear the city humming 42 floors below. Simone would spread the drawings across the conference table, and Jesu would lean over them, and their conversations would begin with load-bearing walls and end somewhere else entirely. Why architecture? The question came one night, born of genuine curiosity. He had met dozens of architects over the years. None of them had ever made him want to understand why. Simone ran her hand across the blueprint, tracing the line of the building's facade. Because buildings are honest. You can't fake a foundation. Either it holds, or everything falls. I grew up around people who performed stability, smiling while the bills piled up, pretending the cracks weren't spreading. Buildings don't pretend. They show you exactly what they're made of. She hadn't meant to say that much. He could see it in the way she pulled her hand back from the paper, as though she'd touched something hot. But he didn't look away, and she didn't retract it. And the silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people recognizing something familiar in each other's architecture. "I understand that." The words came out quietly, performing stability. She looked at him then. Not at the CEO, not at the name on the building, but at the man who had just admitted, in 3 words, that his own foundation had cracks. It was the first time she had seen past the suit. Over the following weeks, The late nights became a language of their own. Coffee that he brought without being asked. Black, 1 sugar. Because he had noticed and remembered without thinking about why he was noticing and remembering. Conversations that started professional and ended personal. Peeling back layers with the careful, tentative precision of archaeologists who know that what they're uncovering is fragile. He told her about Minji on a Thursday in late February, during a snowstorm that had emptied the building. They were the only 2 people on the 42nd floor, the city outside reduced to white static, and the silence felt safe enough for truth. He told her about the engagement, about the wedding plans, about the phone call, the centerpieces, the conference call, the "can we talk about this later," about the call from the hospital, about arriving too late, about the ring he still kept in his desk drawer, not because he was holding on, but because putting it anywhere else would mean deciding what it represented, and he could not survive that decision. Simone listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes, without telling him it wasn't his fault, because she understood that guilt doesn't respond to logic. And telling a guilty person they shouldn't feel guilty is like telling a drowning person they should try breathing. She just listened, and when he was done, she offered the only thing that mattered. The last thing she heard was your voice. Whatever you said, she heard you. That was the last thing she had. You. Jae-soo pressed his fingers to his eyes. He did not cry. He had not cried in 3 years. But the pressure behind his eyes was so intense that for a moment the entire skyline blurred, and he was grateful for the snow. She told him about Derek the following week, about the disappearance, about the diapers that were never purchased, about the first night alone with an 11-month-old, standing in the kitchen at 3 a.m, holding a screaming baby and realizing that no one was coming. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. I didn't cry that night. A pause. I think I was too shocked to cry. I cried the next night, and the night after that. And then I stopped, because Maya needed me functional, not emotional. So I became functional. I became so functional that I forgot how to be anything else. And now my 5-year-old wanders into billionaires' offices trying to find me a husband, so clearly my functionality has some gaps. They both laughed. It was the first time either of them had laughed about something real in longer than they could remember, and the sound of it, surprised, slightly rusty, genuine, filled the empty office like warmth. Then came the drawing. Maya had been sitting in Jae-soo's office on a Friday afternoon, working on what she called a very important art project, with the intensity of a Renaissance master preparing a commission. She would not let him see it. She covered it with her arm when he walked past. She told Biscuit to guard it. When she was done, she presented it to him with both hands, the way you present a gift you have put your entire heart into. 3 figures, drawn in crayon, 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small, holding hands. The tall one had a triangle shape that might have been a tie. The small one had something brown tucked under her arm. Biscuit. And above them, in the careful, lopsided letters of a child who was still mastering the alphabet, 2 words. My family. That's Mommy. Maya pointed. That's me. And that's you. Mr. You. I put you in a tie because you always wear ties. But I can draw you without one if you want. You probably don't wear a tie at home. Do you wear a tie at home? He could not answer. He stood there holding a piece of construction paper that weighed less than an ounce and felt heavier than anything he had ever carried, and the hairline crack from the night she'd asked if he was married became a fissure, and the fissure became a fracture, and the walls he had built so carefully, so precisely, so impenetrably over 3 years of silence and work and controlled emptiness, began to fail. Mr. You, are you okay? Your eyes are doing the thing mommies do. What thing? The shiny thing. Before the crying? But it's okay if you cry. Biscuit cries sometimes too. He's very brave, but he still cries. Jae-soo knelt down so he was at her eye level. He looked at the drawing. He looked at this child who had, with nothing but a box of crayons and an undefended heart. done what 3 years of therapy and work and silence had failed to do. She had made him feel something he couldn't control. "It's a perfect drawing, Maya. Thank you. You can keep it. I made it for your office. So you're not alone when we go home." After they left that evening, Jae-soo sat in his office and looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he opened his desk drawer, took out the engagement ring, and for the first time in 3 years, he put it somewhere else. He placed it in the small wooden box where he kept his grandmother's origami paper and a photograph of his father. Things that mattered. Things that had shaped him. Things he honored by living, not by dying beside them. He taped Maya's drawing to the wall beside his desk, and he left the office with the lights off and went home to his penthouse. And for the first time, the silence felt like something he wanted to fill. The Metropolitan Museum of Art on a Saturday in March. Jae-soo had suggested it. Casually, carefully. The way you suggest something that matters immensely while trying to make it sound like it doesn't. Maya mentioned she's never been to a museum. The Met has an Egyptian wing. Kids love mummies. Professional, reasonable. Not at all the words of a man who had spent 20 minutes looking up the museum's family programs on his phone at midnight. Simone had hesitated. She knew what this was. A Saturday outing was not a Tuesday meeting. A Saturday outing was personal territory, and she had guards posted at every entrance to her personal territory. But Maya had heard the word mummies, and that was the end of any deliberation. They walked through the Egyptian wing with Maya between them, her hand in Simone's, her eyes so wide they seemed to take up half her face. She had questions about everything. Were the mummies sleeping? Did they have pets? Could Biscuit be mummified? If she was very, very still, could she be a statue? She stood motionless for 11 seconds before declaring that being a statue was boring, and she would rather be an explorer. In the European Paintings Gallery, she got tired. Her legs were short, and the museum was vast, and she had been an explorer for almost 2 hours, which was hard work. She reached up without looking, the way children do, automatically, instinctively, reaching for the nearest anchor, and took Jae-soo's hand. She didn't look at him when she did it, didn't ask, didn't announce it. She simply reached up, found his hand, and held on, and kept walking, chattering to Biscuit about whether the painting of the lady in the blue dress was a princess or a queen. Jae-soo looked down at the small hand in his, 5 tiny fingers wrapped around 2 of his, warm, trusting, certain. This child had reached for him the way you reach for someone you believe will be there. And the casualness of that trust, the unearned, unquestioned, freely given certainty that he would hold on, undid him more completely than any declaration could have. Simone saw it. She was walking on Maya's other side, and she saw her daughter reach for this man's hand with the same unconscious confidence with which she reached for Simone's. And something inside Simone shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a wall that had been load-bearing for years, suddenly discovering it didn't have to hold the weight alone. Their eyes met over Maya's head. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. The almost kiss happened in the museum gift shop, of all places. Maya had gone to look at a display of miniature Egyptian cat figurines. Simone and Jae-soo were standing near the postcards, and she was telling him about a project she'd worked on in grad school, a community center design inspired by ancient Roman public baths. And she was laughing, and his hand came up almost involuntarily and brushed a strand of hair from her face, and the laughter stopped, and the air between them compressed to the thickness of a heartbeat, and they leaned toward each other by fractions of inches. Mommy, look. This cat has earrings. They separated. Simone went to look at the cat with earrings. Jae-soo stood by the postcards and pressed his hand flat against the display rack to stop it from trembling, and thought, with startling clarity, I am in serious trouble. His mother arrived in New York on a Wednesday in mid-March, unannounced, which in Mrs. Yu's vocabulary meant carefully planned, but presented as spontaneous, so that refusal was not an option. Yoonji Yu was 61 years old, immaculate, and powered by an engine of maternal authority that could have run a small country. She had buried her husband. She had built a social standing and soul that was the envy of her peers. She had one son, and that son was her project, her legacy, her unfinished masterpiece. She had loved Minji, genuinely, deeply, and Minji's death had calcified something in her. If Jae-soo would not choose a wife himself, she would choose one for him. This was not cruelty. It was engineering. Within 48 hours of her arrival, she had arranged a dinner at a private restaurant in Koreatown with Soo-yeon Park, the daughter of a Seoul-based logistics magnate who had been on Mrs. Yu's shortlist since before Minji's death. Held in reserve, the way chess players keep a piece protected until the moment it is needed. Soo-yeon was elegant, educated, appropriate. She spoke 3 languages, had an MBA from INSEAD, and understood the unspoken architecture of Korean elite marriages, the duties, the appearances, the choreography of a life designed for public consumption. She was, by every metric Mrs. Yu valued, perfect. Jae-soo sat through the dinner with the practiced composure of a man who had been navigating his mother's campaigns for years. He was polite. He was attentive. He was absolutely, categorically elsewhere. Every time Soo-yeon made a comment about real estate or travel or the difficulty of finding good Korean restaurants in New York, he heard Maya's voice. "You look like you could be nice." Every time his mother guided the conversation toward compatibility and shared backgrounds and the importance of proper foundations, he thought of Simone running her hand across a blueprint. Buildings don't pretend. They show you exactly what they're made of. Photographs from the dinner appeared on a Korean Society blog the following day. Jae-soo Yu, CEO of Yu Capital Group, dining with Soo-yeon Park. The caption was careful, insinuating, precise in its implications. Simone saw the article on her phone during her lunch break. She read it once, then put her phone face down on her desk and returned to her drawings with a focus so intense it bordered on violence. She did not mention it. She did not bring it up at their next meeting. She simply recalibrated. She pulled back to professional distance so smoothly, so seamlessly, that it would have been invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Jae-soo was paying attention. He noticed the way she stopped staying late after meetings, the way her emails became shorter, more formal, stripped of the warmth that had begun to creep into their correspondence, the way she positioned her chair farther from his at the conference table. 3 extra inches that felt like 3 extra miles. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell her the dinner meant nothing, that Soo-yeon was his mother's chess piece, not his choice. But explaining would mean acknowledging that there was something between them that required explanation, and neither of them had been brave enough to name it yet. And so the gap widened in the silence. Maya, as always, felt the shift before anyone explained it. Children are seismographs for emotional earthquakes. They feel the tremors before adults even acknowledge the fault line. She was in Jae-soo's office on a Thursday evening, drawing quietly, when she looked up and studied him with those clear, unblinking eyes. "Are you going away?" "What do you mean?" "Mommy's been sad again, the way she gets when someone goes away." A pause. Then, quieter. "Are you going away too?" Two. That one word, 3 letters, 1 syllable, carried the entire weight of Derek's disappearance, of every adult who had entered this child's orbit and then left it. 2 was the word of a 5-year-old who had already learned that people leave and was bracing herself for the next departure. Jae-soo felt something collapse inside his chest, not a wall this time, but a resistance. The resistance he had maintained against caring, against attaching, against allowing himself to be someone who could be gone from. He looked at this child who was asking him, with more courage than most adults possessed, to stay. And he made a decision that was not rational, not strategic, not the kind of decision that appeared in quarterly reports or shareholder meetings. He knelt beside her chair. "I'm not going anywhere. Maya, promise. Promise. Biscuit, promise." This was, he had learned, the highest form of oath in Maya's judicial system. A biscuit promise required touching Biscuit's remaining ear, and could never, under any circumstances, be broken. He touched Biscuit's ear. Biscuit promise. Maya nodded, satisfied, and returned to her drawing. And Jesu stayed kneeling for a moment longer, because he had just made a promise to a 5-year-old that he had not been able to make to himself in 3 years. The promise to stay in someone's life. The promise to be the person who doesn't leave. Derek Cole reappeared on a Sunday in April, 4 years and 3 months after he had walked out for diapers and never come back. He did not call ahead. He did not write. He simply showed up at Simone's apartment building in Harlem, pressed the buzzer, and waited, as though 4 years of absence were a minor scheduling conflict that could be resolved with a smile and a doorbell. Simone opened the door and felt her body go through a sequence of reactions so rapid they blurred together. Recognition, then shock, then a surge of something hot and metallic that was not quite anger and not quite disgust, but lived in the neighborhood of both. He looked different, thinner, dressed better than she remembered, new jacket, clean shoes, the kind of put-together appearance that suggested he had been living a life, a whole entire life, while she had been raising his daughter alone. Simone. Hey. I know. But can we talk? She did not invite him in. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, keeping Maya on the other side of it, because whatever this was, Maya was not going to be part of it until Simone understood what it was. He talked. He had a speech prepared. She could tell by the way his sentences were too smooth, too rehearsed, the verbal equivalent of his new jacket. He had been lost. He had been immature. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. He had been in therapy. He had changed. He wanted to be a father. He wanted to know his daughter. Simone listened to every word with the clinical attention of an architect examining a building she suspected was structurally unsound. She waited for the sentence she knew was coming, the one that would reveal the real reason for his resurrection. And there it was, buried in the middle of his rehearsed redemption arc, like a crack in a foundation. I saw you've been spending time with someone. The Korean guy, the one in the news. That's great, Simone. But Maya's my daughter. I have rights. I just want to be part of her life. Our life. Our life. There had been no our for 4 years. He hadn't come back because he changed. He came back because the vacuum he left had been filled by someone else. And suddenly the family he abandoned looked like something worth claiming. Simone did not raise her voice. She had learned, in 4 years of solo parenting, that volume was a luxury. You walked out on an 11-month-old, Derek. You walked out and you didn't call. Not on her first birthday, not on Christmas, not when she had pneumonia at 2, and I sat in the ER alone for 9 hours. Not once. And now you show up because you saw a headline. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, but not the depth to look ashamed. There is a difference, and Simone recognized it immediately. I'm not keeping you from her, Simone continued. And this was the part that cost her, because it was the truth, and the truth was complicated. If you want to be in Maya's life, really be in it, consistently, permanently, then we figure that out through proper channels, lawyers, custody mediator. But you don't get to walk in here like 4 years was a vacation and claim a family you abandoned. That's not how this works. She went back inside and closed the door, and stood in her kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles ached. Because the alternative was breaking something, and she could not afford to break anything. She had been holding everything together for so long that the prospect of one more thing, one more person pulling at the seams, felt like a physics problem. How much stress can a structure bear before it fails? Maya met Derek the following Saturday, in a diner in Harlem, with Simone sitting in the booth beside her. Simone had explained it as simply as she could. Someone wants to meet you, baby. He knew Mommy a long time ago, before you were born. Maya had absorbed this with her usual solemn intensity. Is he nice? I think he wants to be. That's not the same thing. No, Simone thought. It really isn't. 5 years old and already fluent in the difference between intention and action. Simone wondered when her daughter had learned that, and the answer, she knew, was every single day of her life. Derek tried. He brought a stuffed bear. Purple, new, expensive-looking. Maya accepted it politely and set it on the far end of the table, closer to the wall than to herself. Biscuit remained in her lap. She answered his questions in short sentences. Yes, she liked school. Yes, she liked drawing. No, she didn't like broccoli. But Mommy made her eat it anyway. Then he made the mistake of trying too hard. I'm your dad, Maya. I know we haven't met before, but I'm your dad, and I want us to get to know each other. Maya looked at him for a long time, long enough that Simone felt the air pressure change. I don't know you, Maya said. Not with cruelty, not with anger, with the simple, factual clarity of a child stating something she had verified against her own experience and found to be true. I don't know you was not a rejection. It was an observation, and it was so precise, so free of adult performance, that it landed in the booth like a verdict. Derek looked at Simone as if expecting her to translate, to soften, to bridge the gap. She didn't. This was Maya's truth, and Simone was not going to edit it for his comfort. Jae-soo learned about Derek's return through a call from his assistant, who had flagged a tabloid item linking Simone Archer to both a Korean billionaire and a mystery man seen at her apartment building. The tabloid industrial complex, always efficient in its cruelty. He sat with the information for 2 days before it began to corrode. Not jealousy, or not just jealousy, something deeper and more destructive. The conviction, arriving with the force of a verdict, that he had no right to this. No right to Simone. No right to Maya. No right to insert himself into a family that had a biological architecture he could not alter. Who was he to promise Maya he wouldn't leave? He hadn't been able to protect the woman he loved. He hadn't been able to be there for a phone call about centerpieces. He was a man who had failed at the most basic act of presence, being there when it mattered. And now he was building castles with a 5-year-old's crayons as though he had earned the right to live in them. He pulled back, stopped attending the Tuesday meetings, sent his project manager instead, responded to Simone's emails through his assistant, built walls with the efficiency of someone who had extensive practice. Simone felt the withdrawal immediately and understood it completely because she recognized the architecture. She had designed it herself, years ago. Walls built to code, reinforced with logic, insulated with self-protection. She knew what it looked like when someone convinced themselves that absence was noble, that leaving was kindness, that they were protecting someone else when they were really just protecting themselves. She wanted to fight it. She wanted to march into his office and tell him that she had not asked for his protection, that she had spent 4 years surviving without anyone's help, and she did not need him to save her. But she also did not need him to leave. And there was a vast, critical, desperately important difference between the two. But she didn't, because the part of her that had been abandoned by Derek, the part that had learned to expect departure, whispered what it always whispered. See. They all leave. The ones who matter always leave, and the ones who don't matter were never really here. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. Simone was underground, literally underground, in the basement level of the Lexington construction site, reviewing the foundation work with the structural engineers. No cell signal, no reception, the earth itself between her and the surface. Maya's school called at 2:15, severe asthma attack during recess. Paramedics called. Child transported to New York Presbyterian. The school called Simone's cell. No answer. Called again. No answer. Called the emergency contact list. Grandmother in North Carolina. Answered. Panicked. Helpless. 900 miles away. The second emergency contact, added 3 weeks ago during a routine form update, was a number Simone had entered without thinking about what it meant. Jae-soo U. Jae-soo was in the U Capitol boardroom on the 61st floor when his phone rang. He was in the middle of the most significant meeting of the fiscal year, a $2.3 billion merger with a European development group. 18 months of negotiation condensed into a single afternoon of final terms. His CFO was mid-sentence. The European delegation was watching. His phone buzzed against the mahogany table like a small, insistent heartbeat. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number, but the caller ID showed the name of Maya's school. He answered. The words severe asthma attack and hospital, and we can't reach her mother entered his ear and rearranged every priority he had ever held. $2.3 billion was on the table. 18 months of work. The careers of 40 people in the room. And none of it, absolutely none of it, registered as important. He stood. His CFO stopped mid-sentence. The European delegation looked up. His mother, who had stayed in New York and was observing the meeting from a side chair, watched him with sharp, uncertain eyes. I have to go. No explanation. No excuse. No delegation to an assistant. He picked up his coat, walked out of a $2.3 billion meeting in the middle of a sentence, and was in a car heading to the hospital before anyone in the boardroom fully processed what had happened. He arrived at New York Presbyterian in 14 minutes. He did not remember the drive. He remembered only the sensation of his own pulse in his ears, the violent, unfamiliar experience of fear for someone other than himself. Not the controlled, manageable fear of a bad quarter or a failed deal, but the raw, skinless, annihilating fear of losing someone small and irreplaceable. They let him into the pediatric ward because the words "I'm her emergency contact" came out with enough authority that no one questioned it, and because the school had confirmed his name, and because in that moment, Jae-soo was not a CEO. He was a man who was terrified that a 5-year-old girl who had drawn him into her family with crayons and a one-eared rabbit was in danger. Maya was in a bed that was too big for her, propped up on pillows, a nebulizer mask over her face, her breathing shallow but steady. She was asleep. Biscuit was on the pillow beside her, positioned so that his one remaining ear was touching her cheek. And the sight of that, the careful placement, the tenderness of whoever had arranged a battered stuffed rabbit so that a sick child could feel his ear against her skin, broke something in Jae-soo that he would never fully repair. He sat down beside the bed. He took her hand. So small, so impossibly small. How could anything this small be in a hospital? How could anything this small be hooked up to machines and monitors and things that beeped? And he did not let go. He did not make phone calls, did not check his email, did not think about the merger. He sat in a plastic chair in a pediatric ward in a hospital that smelled like antiseptic and industrial soap. And he held a 5-year-old's hand. And he waited, and he understood, with a clarity that was almost blinding, that this was the most important meeting of his life. Simone came up from the basement at 3:45, checked her phone, saw 9 missed calls, and experienced a full cardiac cycle of terror in under 2 seconds. She ran. She ran out of the construction site, still wearing her hard hat, steel-toed boots pounding the sidewalk, hand up for a cab, couldn't get a cab, ran to the subway, missed the train, caught the next one, stood in a car full of strangers, and gripped the metal pole and shook and could not stop shaking. She arrived at the hospital at 4:20, barely breathing herself, and a nurse directed her to room 412, and she pushed open the door already crying, already apologizing to a God she sometimes argued with, already making deals, anything, take anything, just let her be okay, and stopped. Maya was asleep, stable. The monitor showed steady numbers. The nebulizer had been replaced with a small oxygen tube. Her color was good. She was okay. And beside the bed, in a plastic chair that was too small for him, still wearing his suit, tie loosened, jacket draped over the back of the chair, was Jae-soo. He was holding Maya's hand. His eyes were red. He had not moved since he arrived. The nurses had offered him coffee, and he had not heard them. A doctor had come by with an update, and he had listened to every word with an intensity that made the doctor speak more carefully, more thoroughly than she might have otherwise. Simone stood in the doorway and looked at this man. This man who had walked out of a meeting worth more than most people would see in 100 lifetimes to sit in a plastic chair and hold her daughter's hand. And every wall, every defense, Every carefully constructed barrier she had built over 4 years of doing everything alone crumbled, not slowly, not brick by brick, all at once. Like a building that has been standing long past its structural capacity, held together by nothing but stubbornness and habit, and has finally been given permission to fall. She walked to the bed. He looked up. Their eyes met, and everything they had not said, every late night over blueprints, every accidental touch, every conversation that ended too soon, every inch of distance they had forced between themselves. All of it was in that look, and none of it was hidden, and neither of them tried to hide it. She sat in the chair beside him. He did not let go of Maya's hand. She reached over and placed her hand on top of his, on top of Maya's. 3 hands stacked in a hospital bed like a prayer. They sat like that, together, breathing, not speaking, because words were unnecessary in the presence of something this true. Maya stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, foggy with medication and sleep, and she looked at Simone, and then she looked at Jesu, and a small, tired smile crossed her face. "Mommy, Mr. Yu came." "I see that, baby. He was scared. Like how you get scared." His eyes were doing the shiny thing. She yawned. "That means he loves us, right? Because you only get the shiny eyes for people you love. That's what you told me." Simone looked at Jesu. He looked at her. And whatever had been unnamed between them was no longer unnamed, because a 5-year-old on a hospital bed had given it the only name it needed, with the effortless precision that only children possess. Simone didn't answer Maya with words. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to her daughter's and closed her eyes, and Jesu watched them and felt something he had not felt since the night before. A phone call on a rain-slicked highway ended his world. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Mrs. Yu heard about the meeting before she heard about the hospital. The call from the CFO reached her at 7 that evening. The merger was stalled. The Europeans were insulted. $2 billion was in limbo because her son had walked out without a word. She was furious. She was terrified. She was his mother. She called Jesu 16 times. He finally answered from the hospital parking lot at 9 p.m., his voice rougher than she had heard it in years. A child was in the hospital. I had to go. Whose child? What child? You don't have children, Jesu. The silence on the line lasted 4 seconds. In that silence, Mrs. Yu heard something she had not heard from her son since the night she called to tell him about Minji. The sound of a man deciding to stop pretending. "I need to talk to you, Iyama. In person. Tomorrow." They met at his apartment the following morning. Mrs. Yu sat on the sofa with her back straight and her hands folded, prepared for battle, armed with arguments about duty and lineage and the importance of proper matches. She had rehearsed her case. She knew her evidence. She was ready. She was not ready for what her son said. Jesu did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He sat across from his mother and spoke with a clarity she had never heard from him. Not the sharp clarity of business negotiations, but the quiet clarity of a man who has finally stopped running from himself. "When Minji died, I stopped living. You know that. I know you know that because you've been trying to restart me ever since. Dinners, introductions, Su Yan. You've been trying to fix me the way you fix everything, with strategy and structure and the right connections. And I love you for it, Yama. I do. But you cannot engineer someone back to life." Mrs. Yu's hands tightened in her lap. 3 years. For 3 years, I have been going through the motions. Working, building, acquiring, performing the version of me that looks alive. But I was not alive. I was a building with no one in it. Functional, maintained, but empty. You know that. You've known it every Sunday when you call and listen to me recite the week's numbers like a quarterly report, instead of telling you something real. Jesu. A little girl walked into my office and asked me if I was married, and I said no. And she asked me if I wanted to be. And I couldn't answer, because the honest answer was so terrifying I couldn't say it out loud. The honest answer was yes. Yes, I want to be. Yes, I want a family. Yes, I want someone to come home to. Yes, I want to stop performing stability and actually build something real. But I was so afraid of losing again, of failing again, of saying the wrong thing on the last phone call, that I chose emptiness because emptiness can't be taken away. He paused. His mother was looking at him with an expression he had never seen. Not disapproval, not strategy, but recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when you see your own pain reflected in your child's face and realize, with a shock, that your solutions have not helped. That you have been treating symptoms while the wound stays open. Simone and Maya, they didn't fix me. That's not what this is. They showed me that I was allowed to stop punishing myself. That surviving doesn't have to mean standing still. Minji would not have wanted this. Iyama. She would not have wanted me to turn into a monument to what we lost. She would have wanted me to live. She would have wanted me to hold a 5-year-old's hand in a hospital. She would have wanted me to be someone who shows up. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a folded piece of construction paper. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the coffee table between them. 3 crayon figures holding hands. My family. Mrs. Yu looked at the drawing for a long time. Her face did not change, but her hands loosened in her lap, and she reached forward and touched the edge of the paper with one finger, tracing the outline of the smallest figure, the one with the brown blob under her arm. She drew this. Her name is Maya. She's 5. She's brave and funny, and she talks to her stuffed rabbit like he's a real person, and she sees things that adults have trained themselves not to see. And her mother is the strongest person I have ever met. She built a life out of nothing, and she did it alone, and she did not break. I need you to hear me, Iyama. I need you to hear me when I tell you that this is not a phase, and it is not a distraction, and it is not something I am going to walk away from because it doesn't fit the plan you made. The silence that followed was the longest of Jesu's life. He watched his mother's face and waited, and in the waiting, he felt the full weight of what he was risking. Not her approval, exactly, but her understanding. Her willingness to let go of the version of his future she had been constructing in the absence of the one that was taken. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than he expected. When you were 5, you drew pictures of our family. You, me, your father, our dog. You drew us holding hands in every picture, always holding hands. She touched the drawing again. I had forgotten that until right now. She did not say I approve. She did not say you have my blessing. She said something more honest, and ultimately more important. I don't know how to let go of what I wanted for you, but I am willing to learn what you want for yourself. It was not a resolution. It was a beginning. And for the first time in 3 years, a beginning was enough. The conversation with Derek happened the following week. Simone did not do it alone. Not because she couldn't. She had been doing everything alone for 4 years, and she was more than capable. But because she chose, deliberately and for the first time, to let someone stand beside her. Jesu was there, not to speak for her, not to fight for her, but to be present, to be the person in the room who would not leave. Derek sat across from them in a mediation office in Midtown, and Simone spoke with the measured precision of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in her head for years, without knowing she was rehearsing it. You have the right to be in Maya's life, Derek. Legally, biologically, yes. But rights are not the same as presence. You walked out. You stayed gone. You didn't call on her birthdays. You didn't send a card at Christmas. You didn't ask if she was healthy, if she was happy, if she was afraid of the dark. You left, and I stayed. And the distance between those two things is not something you can close with a speech and a stuffed bear. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. If you want to build a relationship with Maya, you build it slowly, through consistency, through showing up when there's no headline to motivate you, through being there on the boring days, the sick days, the tantrums, the 3 a.m. nightmares. You earn it. You don't claim it. There was nothing in Derek's expression that suggested he was prepared for the boring days, the sick days, the tantrums. He looked at Simone, and then at Jesu, and then at his own hands. And in that downward glance, all three of them saw the truth. He had not come back for Maya. He had come back for the idea of Maya, the idea of a family, the idea of redemption, the idea of being a father without doing the work of fatherhood. He signed an agreement to begin supervised visits. He attended 2. Then 3 weeks passed without contact. Then a month. Then silence. The same silence he had always been made of, repackaged with better clothes and a rehearsed speech. But silence all the same. Maya, when Simone gently explained that the man from the diner might not be coming back, nodded with a solemnity that would have been heartbreaking if it hadn't been accompanied by a statement that proved she was, fundamentally, going to be fine. "That's okay, Mommy. Biscuit says some people are visitors and some people are stayers, Mr. You is a stayer." Biscuit, for a one-eared rabbit with compromised stuffing, was astonishingly wise. The Lexington project was completed in September, 5 weeks ahead of schedule. Simone's design was featured in Architectural Digest, a 3-page spread that called her vision a masterwork of adaptive reuse, a building that honors its history while insisting on its future. Her firm promoted her. 2 competing firms called with offers. She turned them down because she had learned something about foundations. You don't abandon a structure that's holding. You build on it. Jesu renegotiated the European merger. It closed at $2.1 billion, slightly less than the original terms, a concession his CFO attributed to the walkout and Jesu attributed to not caring. Some things were worth more than the last $100 million. The Europeans, privately, respected him more for it. A man who will leave a $2 billion meeting for a child's hospital visit is a man who has his priorities in the right order, and priorities, in the long run, are a better indicator of reliability than punctuality. Mrs. Yu returned to Seoul, but she called every Sunday, and the calls changed. She asked about Maya. Hesitantly at first, the way you ask about something you don't fully understand but are trying to. "How is the little one? Does she still draw?" One Sunday, she asked Simone to send a photograph of Maya's latest artwork. And when Simone sent a drawing of a dinosaur wearing a crown, Mrs. Yu responded with a single text. "The crown is a good choice. Dinosaurs should look dignified." It was Mo, in the vocabulary of Yoonji Yu, practically a bear hug. Maya started calling him Mr. Yu less and Jesu more. And then one evening in November, while they were making kimchi jjigae in Simone's kitchen, a recipe from his grandmother, adjusted for a 5-year-old's spice tolerance, Maya tugged on his sleeve and said, "Can I call you something else?" "Like what?" She thought about it. Hard. The way she thought about everything, with full commitment and furrowed brow. Appa. She had heard the word on the Korean cartoon Jesu had shown her the week before. She knew what it meant. Jesu looked at Simone. Simone looked at Maya. Maya looked at both of them with the calm expectation of someone who had made a perfectly reasonable request and could not understand why the adults were taking so long to respond. "Yes," Jesu said. And then, because the word was insufficient, but his throat had closed around everything else. "Yes, you can call me that. Okay, Appa?" She turned back to the stew. "I think it needs more of the red stuff." Simone covered her mouth with her hand and turned toward the window, because some things are too full to witness without breaking. And she wanted to break beautifully, privately, in the golden kitchen light of a Harlem apartment that had once held only 2 people and now held 3 and felt, for the first time, like enough. 1 year later. Central Park, October. The kind of autumn afternoon that New York does better than anywhere else on Earth. The trees on fire, the light golden, the air carrying just enough chill to justify being close to someone. They were on a bench near the Bethesda fountain. Maya was on the ground in front of them, surrounded by her crayons, working on another very important art project. Biscuit was propped against her backpack, supervising. Jesu had his arm around Simone. She was leaning into him, reading something on her phone, and he was watching Maya draw, and the feeling in his chest was so different from the tightening that had lived there for 3 years that he almost didn't recognize it. It was expansion. It was warmth. It was the sensation of a building that was no longer empty. Maya finished her drawing. She held it up for inspection with the same ceremonial gravity she had shown the first time, in his office, a lifetime ago. 4 figures this time. 3 of them were familiar. The tall one with the tie, though he wore ties less often now. The medium one. The small one with biscuit. But there was a 4th figure. Very small. Tucked between the tall one and the medium one. Barely more than a circle with stick legs. That's Mommy. That's me. That's Appa. She pointed to the 4th figure. And that's the baby. Jesu's hand stopped on Simone's shoulder. He turned to look at her. She had put her phone down. She was looking at Maya with an expression that contained about 14 different emotions, only half of which she could name. Then she looked at Jesu, and her eyes were doing the shiny thing, and she nodded. Maya, Jesu said slowly. What, baby? Maya did not look up from adding a sun to her drawing. The baby in Mommy's tummy. I asked for a brother. Mommy said she'd try. I think she tried. She added rays to the sun with meticulous care. I hope he likes dinosaurs. Jesu looked at Simone. Simone bit her lip. Then she took his hand and placed it flat against her belly, still almost flat, still almost invisible, still the smallest beginning of the biggest thing, and he felt the world rearrange itself, not with drama, not with fireworks, but with the quiet, seismic certainty of a foundation being laid. How long? 8 weeks. I was going to tell you tonight. She beat me to it. Simone glanced at Maya. She found the test in the bathroom trash. I need to start using a better hiding spot. She's 5. How does she know what a pregnancy test is? She doesn't. She brought it to me and said it looked like a thermometer and asked if I had a fever. I said something like that. She said I should rest. Then she told Biscuit we might need a bigger apartment. Jesu laughed. It was a real laugh. The kind that comes from a place that has been rebuilt, that has new walls and bigger windows, and a door that stays open. He pulled Simone closer and pressed his lips to her temple and breathed in the scent of her. Shea butter and coffee and the faint chemical tang of architectural ink. And felt, with his hand on her belly and his daughter drawing at his feet and the city blazing gold around them, the full, staggering weight of gratitude. Because all of this, every moment, every crack in the wall, every late night over blueprints, every terrified drive to the hospital, every Sunday call with his mother, every crayon drawing, every biscuit promise, all of it had started with a question. The most important question anyone had ever asked him. Asked not in a boardroom or a courtroom or a church, but in an empty office on a Tuesday night, by a 5-year-old girl in a purple sweater with a one-eared rabbit under her arm and the absolute, unshakable conviction that love was simple. Are you married? No, he had said, and the word had been full of everything he'd lost. Do you want to be? He hadn't answered then, but he could answer now, and the answer was yes. The answer had always been yes. He had just needed a 5-year-old and a one-eared rabbit to help him remember. Maya finished the sun, added one final detail, a small heart floating above the 4 figures, drawn in red crayon, slightly lopsided, perfectly imperfect. She held the drawing up. This one's for the fridge. Appa. The fridge is for the important ones. He took the drawing, looked at it. 4 figures, a heart, and a sun. Everything he'd ever needed, drawn in crayon on a Tuesday in Central Park by a child who had walked into his office and changed his life with the simplest, bravest, most devastating question a human being can ask. Are you married? Do you want to be? If this story touched you, leave a comment and tell me what moment broke you. And if you haven't already, Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The next story might just wreck you even more.